Lee Jun stood very still. The air in the Galactic Commonwealth Academy smelled strange. It was a mix of sharp chemicals, something like old metal, and a sweet smell he did not know. He breathed in slowly. He was trying to remember this moment. He was the first human to stand here, on the training deck of the most famous military school in the known galaxy. The room was enormous. The ceiling was so high it was lost in a soft, glowing light. The floor was a dark, polished material that felt hard and cold through his boots. All around him were the other cadets. They were not human. There was a tall, slender being with blue skin and 4 thin arms. Next to her was a creature that looked like a walking mountain. His skin was gray and rocky, and when he moved, it made a sound like stones grinding together. Another cadet had a hard, shiny shell covering his back, like a giant insect. They were the Xylosians, the species that ran the academy. They were all so different, but they all shared one thing. They looked strong. They looked like they belonged. June felt Kim Soo nudge him gently with her elbow. She was the only other human here. Her face was calm, but her eyes were moving quickly, taking in everything. "Look at the size of this place," she whispered. Her voice was quiet, but it seemed loud in the quiet hum of the deck. June just nodded. He was not a talkative person. He preferred to watch. He saw how the other cadets stood. He saw how they looked at him and Sue. Their looks were not friendly. They were looks of curiosity and confusion and sometimes dislike. They were the softskins, the ones with no claws, no shells, no natural armor. Just flesh and bone. A door hissed open on the far side of the deck. Everyone stopped moving. Everyone stopped whispering. A Xylosian officer walked in. He was even bigger than the other Xylosian cadets. His black chitin shell was polished until it shone under the lights. He had 4 arms, and his face was a rigid mask with large, dark eyes. This was Cadet Master Kalar. His name was known across the Commonwealth. He was a legend, and he was their teacher. Kalar walked to the center of the room. His steps were silent and precise. His eyes moved over the new cadets. When his gaze passed over June and Sue, it paused for just a second. It was like a physical weight. "Welcome." Kalar's voice was deep. It did not need a speaker to fill the huge room. "You are here because your species believe you are the best. You are the strongest, the smartest, the most disciplined. I am here to find out if they are correct." He gestured with one of his lower arms. In the very center of the training deck, there was a large, dark gray block. It was a simple shape, a rectangle about as tall as June's waist. It looked very heavy. "This," Kalar said, "is the Keeper's Stone. It is a symbol of this academy. It represents physical power. It represents mental resolve. It is a test." He walked over to the stone. "The test is simple. You lift it. You lift it from the floor and you hold it." A few of the alien cadets shifted. A large reptilian cadet with thick muscles flexed his claws. He looked confident. "Do not be fooled by its simplicity," Kalar continued. "The stone has a solid iridium core. It is magnetically locked to the floor. Its weight is approximately 800 kilograms. For many of you, this is a weight that challenges the very limits of your biology. For some of you, it is a weight that can break you." His dark eyes scanned the crowd again. No first-year cadet has fully lifted the Keeper's Stone in 10 cycles. It is a goal, a reminder that there is always a higher level of strength to achieve. He pointed a sharp finger at the large, rocky cadet. "Bronton, step forward." The mountain-like creature took a heavy step forward. The floor vibrated. His name was Gorv. He was from a high-gravity world. Everyone thought he would be the one to do it. "Attempt the lift," Kalar commanded. Gorv moved to the stone. He bent his massive legs, getting his broad shoulders low. He wrapped his big stone-like arms around the block. He took a deep breath, which sounded like a landslide. Then he began to lift. A low groan came from Gorv. It also came from the stone. The magnetic locks resisted him. The muscles in his back and legs bunched up, looking like moving rock. Slowly, with a terrible scraping sound, the stone began to move. It lifted a centimeter, then 2. The other cadets watched, their eyes wide. But then a sharp cracking sound echoed in the room. It was not a loud noise, but everyone heard it. It was the sound of something solid breaking under pressure. Gorv cried out a deep roar of pain and frustration and dropped the stone. It hit the floor with a loud final bang that made everyone jump. Gorv stumbled back, one of his big hands clutching his lower back. His rocky face was twisted in pain. His spine had not been able to handle the weight. "Failure," Kalar said. his voice flat and without emotion. Next, Felician. A sleek cat-like cadet named Solana stepped forward. She was fast and agile. She looked at the stone, then at Kalar. She knew her body was not built for this. Her spine was flexible for climbing and leaping, not for heavy vertical weight. She bent down, tried to find a grip, and strained. She managed to tilt one end of the stone maybe a centimeter off the ground before she let go, shaking her head. "I cannot, Cadet Master," she said, her voice a soft hiss. "The risk to my central column is too great." Kalar simply nodded. A wise, if unsuccessful, attempt next. One by one, the other cadets tried. The four-armed blue cadet tried to use her extra limbs for leverage, but the weight was too much. Her slender bones were not made for it. She stopped when one of her arms made a worrying popping sound. Another cadet, who looked like a thick, muscular worm, tried to wrap his body around it, but he could not break the magnetic lock. Each time, the result was the same: failure. Some heard a sickening creak from their own bodies and stopped just in time. Others, like Gorv, learned a painful lesson about their limits. The stone sat there, dark and unmovable. It was more than a rock. It was a wall. Finally, Kalar's gaze landed on the two humans. The room was very quiet. All the alien eyes were on them. Cadet, a Zolosian cadet with a particularly shiny shell, smirked. He had only managed to lift one corner of the stone before his back screamed in protest. What chance did these soft, fragile things have? "The humans," Kalar said. "You will attempt the lift." Kim Soo looked at June. Her face was pale. "June," she whispered. June's face showed no expression. He walked forward. His steps were quiet. He did not look at the other cadets. He stopped in front of the keeper's stone. He looked at it. It was just a block. A very heavy block. He knew what 800 kilograms meant. It was heavy, but he also knew what his body could do. He had spent years training. He knew about leverage, about form, about the strength of the human back and legs when used correctly. He bent his knees, not his back. He kept his spine straight. He got a good grip on the two handholds on the side of the stone. He took a breath, tightened his core, and prepared to push with his legs. But then he stopped. He looked at Gorv, who was still rubbing his injured back. He looked at Solana, who watched him with pity in her eyes. He looked at Cadet, who was waiting for him to fail to hear the snap of human bones. This was not a test of strength, June realized. It was a performance. It was a ritual to show who was the strongest in the traditional way. Lifting this stone would not help him learn to pilot a ship. It would not help him understand alien technology. It would only make the others see him as a threat. It would create more problems. It would feed their pride or his own, and pride was a dangerous thing here so far from home. He relaxed his grip. He stood up. He looked directly at Cadet Master Kalar. "I cannot lift it, sir," June said. His voice was calm and clear. A wave of quiet laughter and muttered clicks and hisses went through the alien cadets. Cadet laughed out loud. Kalar stared at him. "You did not even try, Cadet." "I assessed the object and my own capabilities, sir," June replied. "I determined that a successful lift was not a useful expenditure of energy at this time." Kalar was silent for a long moment. The air felt thick. "So the humans have no strength. They only have excuses." He turned away in dismissal, a disappointing but predictable result. June walked back to his place next to Kim Soo. She looked at him confused. "June, you can lift that," she whispered fiercely. "I've seen you lift more than that in the gym back home." "I know," June said quietly, his eyes still on the unmoving stone. "But why? To prove something to them? We are here to learn, Sue, not to play their games." The other cadets looked away from them now. The humans were dismissed. They were not a threat. They were weak. They were beneath notice. Lee Jun was happy to let them think that. For now, it was the safest place to be. He stood there, the unseen cadet, and continued to watch. And he learned. The days settled into a hard rhythm at the academy. For Lee Jun and Kim Soo, every day was a lesson in being different. The other cadets had mostly stopped looking at them with open curiosity. Now the looks were simpler. They were looks of dismissal. The two humans were the ones who had failed the first test. They were the weak ones. Their living quarters were small and plain. It was a relief to be away from the staring eyes. Sue sat on her bed, rubbing her shoulders. They ached from the day's drills. "Another day of being the worst," she said with a tired sigh. I don't think Cadet Master Kalar has spoken a single word to me that wasn't a command or a criticism. June was doing slow, careful stretches on the floor. He was working on his flexibility. His opinion does not change what we can do, he said, his voice calm. That's easy for you to say, Sue replied. You don't seem to care what they think. I care about learning, June said. I do not care about their games of status. The games of status were constant. The cadets were always competing. Who was the strongest? The fastest? The most fearless? In all these contests, the humans came last. The next day on the training deck proved it again. The lesson was on raw power. The task was to move a large, broken piece of a ship's engine from one end of a marked area to the other. The piece was made of dense metal. It was heavier than the keeper's stone, but it could be dragged or pushed. It was a test of pure force. Bakde, the Xylosian with the shiny shell, went first. He planted his 4 feet firmly on the ground. He used his 2 lower arms to brace himself and his 2 upper arms to push. His powerful legs drove forward. The heavy engine block screeched as it slid across the floor. He pushed it the full distance quickly. He stood up, his chest swelling with pride. He looked over at the humans, a clear challenge in his eyes. Then it was Gorv's turn. The Bronton cadet's back was still wrapped in a supportive brace from his injury with the stone. He could not push. Instead, he used his immense strength to get his arms under one end of the block. He lifted it and began to drag it. It was slow, but he finished. He was sweating heavily, his rocky skin glistening. When it was June's turn, he tried to push like Bakde had. He put his shoulder against the cold metal and pushed with all his leg strength. The block moved, but only a little. It was a struggle. He had to stop and start, his muscles burning. He finally got it across the line, his breath coming in hard gasps. He was one of the slowest. Kim Soo did even worse. She simply did not have the body mass to move it effectively. She tried to find a clever way using a lever, but Cadet Master Kalar forbade it. Raw power, Cadet. Not trickery. She had to push, and she barely managed to move it halfway before her strength gave out. Kalar marked her as failed. Bakde walked past them as they caught their breath. Perhaps you should go back to your little world, he said, his voice a low click. This is a place for warriors, not for... Whatever you are, June looked at him. He was still breathing heavily. We are cadets, he said. The same as you. Bakde laughed. No, we are not the same. He turned and walked away. Later, there was a different kind of test. It was a test of fine motor control while under stress. The cadets had to sit in a simulator that shook and rattled like a ship in a battle. At the same time, they had to use a precise tool to repair a tiny, complicated circuit inside a fake control panel. The wires were thinner than a hair. The big, strong cadet struggled immediately. Gorv's thick fingers were like stones. He broke the circuit the moment he touched it. Bakde's insect-like claws were good for gripping, but not for delicate work. He fumbled with the small tool, his frustration growing. The simulator's shaking made his movements jerky. He snapped 2 of the tiny wires. Park Ji-hyo, a sharp-eyed cadet from a species known for its intelligence, did better. She was careful and patient, but even she was too rough. The delicate tool slipped in her hand and she damaged the circuit board. Then it was June's turn. He sat in the shaking simulator. He took a deep breath and blocked out the noise and the movement. He picked up the tool. His hands, which had seemed so weak before, were now perfectly steady. The human hand, with its 5 flexible fingers and sensitive touch, was built for this. He carefully reconnected the tiny wires. His movements were smooth and exact. He finished the repair in less than half the time of the fastest alien cadet. The simulator went quiet. A green light lit up on the panel. Success. Cadet Master Kalar watched, his dark eyes unreadable. He said nothing. Kim Soo was just as good. Her repair was also fast and perfect. For a moment, the other cadets were quiet. They had seen something they did not understand. How could the weak ones be so good at this? But the moment passed. Bakde scoffed. A useful trick for a mechanic, he said to his friends. But a warrior needs strength, not clever fingers. The reputation of the humans was set. They were the clever ones, the weak ones. They were good at small, unimportant tasks. They were not warriors. The keeper's stone remained in the center of the training deck. Every day June walked past it. He did not look at it with longing or with fear. He looked at it like it was just a piece of furniture. A heavy, inconvenient piece of furniture. One evening, Sue and June were in the common room. A few other cadets were there, talking and relaxing. A view screen showed a news report from across the galaxy. The reporter was talking about a species known for their incredible explosive power, their ability to run very fast for short distances. "See?" Backday said loudly, pointing at the screen. "That is real strength. That is power you can see. Not hiding behind tiny tools." Park Ji-hyo was sitting nearby, reading on a datapad. She looked up. "Different species have different advantages, Backday," she said in her logical voice. "The humans have shown remarkable skill in control and patience." "Patience?" Backday laughed. "Is that what they call weakness now?" June was sitting quietly, watching the news report. He was not listening to the argument. He was studying the way the alien species on the screen moved. He was learning. Sue, however, had enough. "We are not weak," she said, her voice tight. Backday turned to her. "Oh, then prove it. The stone is still there. Go and lift it. Or can you only lift tiny wires?" "Lifting that stone is a stupid test," Sue shot back. "It doesn't prove anything about being a good officer. It proves you are not the weakest one here," Backday said. "And you are." June stood up. "Sue," he said quietly. "Let's go." Sue glared at Backday for a moment longer, then turned and followed June out of the common room. In the quiet hallway, she let out a frustrated groan. "I hate this, June. I hate that they look down on us. Why don't you ever say anything? Why don't you ever stand up for us?" June stopped walking. He looked at her. His face was calm, but his eyes were serious. "What would I say? That they are wrong? They would not believe me. They need to see it for themselves. Fighting with words is useless." "But we just have to take it?" Sue asked. "No," June said. "We have to be smarter. We have to learn everything we can. Their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. That is how we win. Not by pushing a heavy block to make a bully feel small." He started walking again. "Their pride is their problem. Not ours. We are here to learn. That is all." Sue followed him, not entirely satisfied, but knowing he was right. June had a plan. He always had a plan. He was playing a longer game. The next day, there was a long-distance run in the artificial gravity of the training deck. The gravity was set higher than Earth's. For the large, heavy cadets like Gorv, it was exhausting. For the Gylosians, it was uncomfortable. They were built for power, not for lasting a long time. Backday started fast, wanting to be first. But after a few laps, he began to slow down. His breathing became labored. Gorv was soon walking, his heavy body not made for this. June and Sue, however, just ran. They found a steady, manageable pace. Their breathing was even. The high gravity was tough, but their bodies were built for endurance. On Earth, their ancestors had run for days to hunt their food. This was in their blood. They did not come in first, but they did not come in last. They passed Backday on his 5th lap. He was struggling, his 4 legs feeling like lead. He looked at them with shock as they ran past him, their movement still smooth and efficient. They passed Gorv, who was just standing still, trying to catch his breath. When the run was over, June and Sue were tired, but they were still on their feet. Many of the other cadets were lying on the floor or bent over, exhausted. Cadet Master Kalar watched it all. He saw the humans' steady pace. He saw their recovery. He said nothing, but he was starting to see a pattern. The humans were inconsistent. They failed badly in some things. They excelled strangely in others. It did not make sense to him. That night, June lay in his bed. He thought about the run. He thought about the circuit repair. He thought about the heavy engine block. He thought about the Keeper's Stone. He knew what he could do. He knew the strength he had in his body, but he also knew that showing it at the wrong time for the wrong reason was a mistake. A big mistake. He had to wait. The right moment would come. It always did, for now he was the weak human, the one who could not lift the stone, and that was just fine with him. The air on the station was different. It was the day of the grand inspection. Representatives from the Galactic Commonwealth Council were coming. They were very important. They would decide the Academy's budget for the next cycle. They would judge if the cadets were being trained well. Everything had to be perfect. Cadet Master Kalar had drilled this into them for days. The deck must shine. Every panel, every conduit, every floor tile must be spotless. There will be no failure. There will be no excuses. The cadets had spent the whole morning cleaning. They polished the walls. They wiped down the training equipment. The air smelled sharply of cleaner. The usually noisy deck was quiet, filled only with the sound of rubbing cloths and soft footsteps. Lee Jun worked with Kim Soo. They were cleaning a bank of control panels. Jun was very careful. He made sure no smudges were left on the screens. His movements were slow and precise. He liked this kind of work. It required patience. Sue looked around the spotless deck. "It looks good," she whispered. "Maybe too good. It feels like something is going to happen." Jun did not answer. He was focused on a tiny speck of dust on a button. Nearby, Bakde was polishing the base of the keeper's stone. He made a show of it, rubbing the dark metal until it gleamed. He looked over at the humans. "A task suited for your skills," he said, not quietly enough. "Cleaning." Park Ji-hyo, who was organizing tools on a rack, sighed. "We are all cleaning, Bakde. It is a shared duty." Suddenly, a loud hiss echoed through the deck. It was a sharp, high-pressured sound. Everyone jumped and turned towards the noise. A maintenance droid was parked near the far wall. "Create more chapters, headings, or parts numbers in each par." The silence in the training deck was absolute. It was a heavy, thick silence, filled with the shock of what they had just seen. Lee Jun stood perfectly still, holding the keeper's stone against his chest as if it were made of foam. Kim Soo was the first to break from the spell. Her brain, frozen by the impossible sight, suddenly clicked back into action. Jun's simple, practical request cut through her shock. "The floor? Clean the floor?" She grabbed one of the large industrial absorbers and moved forward. She did not run. She walked carefully, her eyes locked on Jun's calm face. She pushed the absorber across the floor where the stone had been. It made a wet, sticky sound as it soaked up the green gel. The area was clean in seconds. She stepped back. "Done," she said, her voice a little shaky. Jun nodded. Then, with the same smooth, controlled motion, he bent his knees and lowered the stone. He set it down gently, exactly in its original spot. The sound it made when it touched the floor was a soft, final clunk. It was the quietest sound, but in the silent room, it was louder than an explosion. The moment the stone was down, the main doors to the training deck hissed open. The inspection team walked in. There were 3 of them. A tall, elegant being with long silver hair, a stout, furry creature with many eyes, a third who moved on a silent anti-gravity disc. They looked around the deck, their faces pleased. "Cadet Master Kalar," the silver-haired one said. "The deck is impeccable. A credit to your discipline." Kalar was still staring at Jun. He was not moving. He was not breathing. It took a great force of will for him to tear his eyes away from the human cadet. He turned to face the inspectors. His voice, when he spoke, was strangely hollow. "Thank you, Counselor. We strive for perfection." The inspection team began to walk slowly around the deck. They looked at the clean equipment. They looked at the polished walls. They glanced at the keeper's stone, sitting clean and proud in the center of the now spotless floor. They saw nothing wrong. They saw only perfection. All the while, the cadets stood at attention. But their minds were not on the inspection. Their minds were replaying the same few seconds over and over. The human bending his knees, the stone lifting. Him holding it. His calm voice. Bakde's face was a mask of confusion and horror. His shell felt tight. His mind was screaming. How was it possible? The human was weak. He had failed. He had refused to lift it. It was a trick. It had to be a trick. But he had seen it with his own eyes. He had seen the muscles in Jun's legs and back. He had seen the pure, easy power. There was no trick. Gorv, the massive Bronton, looked at his own big, rocky hands. He remembered the sharp, breaking pain in his spine. He looked at Jun's straight, unharmed back. A deep, shameful understanding began to dawn on him. The human's body was not fragile. It was just different. It was built for that exact kind of weight. Park Ji-hyo was not feeling shame. She was feeling a sharp intellectual excitement. Her brain was analyzing the data, the human's straight back, the use of the legs, the lack of strain. It was not brute force. It was optimized, efficient strength. She had been wrong. They had all been wrong. The humans were not hiding a weakness. They were hiding a power they saw as normal. The inspection seemed to last forever. But finally, the counselors were satisfied. They congratulated Kalar again and left the deck. The doors hissed shut behind them. The moment they were gone, the spell broke. The deck was still quiet, but now it was a waiting quiet. All eyes were on Cadet Master Kalar. The veteran officer slowly turned. He did not look at the other cadets. He looked only at Li Jun. He walked towards him. His four-legged gait was slow, deliberate. He stopped in front of Jun. He looked down at the human from his great height. The other cadets expected yelling. They expected punishment for the near disaster. They expected something. Kalar did none of that. His stern, unreadable face was gone. In its place was something they had never seen before. Awe. Pure, undisguised awe. Cadet. Kalar's voice was soft, almost a whisper. It was the most frightening sound any of them had ever heard from him. Your species. Your spine. How? Jun met his gaze. He was not afraid. He was not proud. He was just answering a question. Sir, Jun began, his voice even. On Earth, our ancestors did not have claws or shells. They could not run very fast. They were not the strongest hunters. He paused, choosing his words carefully. They were persistence hunters. They would follow their prey for days, under the hot sun, across long distances. They would walk and run until the prey was too tired to go on. He gestured to the stone. But to eat, they had to carry the meat home. Sometimes it was a very heavy animal. They had to carry it for many miles. So our bodies learned. Our spines are very good at holding weight in a straight line. Our legs are for pushing. Our backs are for staying straight and strong. He looked at the stone, then back at Kalar. That weight is heavy, but it is a simple deadlift, a basic exercise. My people lift such weights for sport, to get stronger. We just never saw the need to mention it. Never saw the need to mention it. The words hung in the air. They were not an apology. They were not a boast. They were a simple, devastating fact. The greatest test of physical strength in the academy was, to a human, a basic exercise. Not worth mentioning. Bakde felt like he had been punched in the stomach. All his insults. All his mockery. The humans had not been hiding their weakness. They had been patiently enduring his stupidity. He had been making fun of a being who considered the Keeper's Stone a casual workout. Park Ji-hyo felt a smile touch her lips. It was all so clear now. The endurance runs. The fine motor control. It was all connected. Humanity was a species of terrifying endurance and specialized, efficient strength. They were not weak. They were perhaps the most dangerously adaptable species here. Cadet Master Kalar continued to stare at Jun. The truth was rewriting everything he knew. The soft skins had a skeletal structure that could handle compressive forces that would shatter most of the cadets in his command. Their weakness was an illusion. And you? Kalar asked, his voice still quiet. You could have lifted this on the first day. Why did you not? Jun looked around the room. He looked at the faces of the other cadets. He saw their shock, their confusion, their shame. It was not relevant, sir, Jun said. Lifting a heavy block does not teach me how to navigate a star system. It does not help me understand alien cultures. It was a test of pride. I am not here for pride. I am here to learn. He had not refused out of weakness. He had refused out of a different kind of strength. A strength of mind. He had seen the test for what it was, a pointless ritual, and he had chosen not to play. Kalar took a step back. He looked at Jun not as a cadet, but as something new, something he did not fully understand. He gave a slow, respectful nod. It was a small gesture, but from Cadet Master Kalar it was like a medal. Then he turned to the rest of the cadets. His voice returned to its normal, commanding tone, but the meaning had changed. The inspection is over. You are dismissed. The cadets did not move at first. Then slowly they began to file out. They walked past Li Jun. They did not look at him with dismissal anymore. They looked at him with a new, cautious respect. And a little bit of fear. Kim Soo walked up to Jun. She looked at him, her eyes wide. She shook her head slowly. So, she said, a small smile finally breaking through her shock. Never saw the need to mention it, huh? Jun looked at the Keeper's Stone one last time. Then he looked at Sue and allowed himself a very small, quiet smile. It wasn't relevant, he repeated, until the floor needed cleaning. The story of what happened on the training deck spread through the academy faster than a virus. It was told in the dining hall. It was whispered in the corridors. It was argued about in the common rooms. Li Jun, the quiet, unseen human, was now the most famous cadet in the entire station. But fame did not change him. The next morning he woke up at the same time. He did the same stretches. He walked to the training deck with Kim Soo just like always. The difference was in how everyone else acted. When June and Sue walked into the dining hall for breakfast, the loud talking stopped. Every alien eye turned to look at them. It was not the same as before. Before, the looks were dismissive. Now they were careful. They were looks of people trying to understand something dangerous. Bakdai was sitting with his usual group. He saw June come in. He immediately looked down at his food. His face was tight with shame and confusion. He did not say a word. Gorv, the big Bronton, was sitting alone. When June walked past his table, Gorv looked up. He gave a slow, respectful nod. It was an apology and an acknowledgement all in one. June nodded back. Nothing needed to be said. On the training deck, Cadet Master Kalar was different too. He did not yell. He did not single out the humans for criticism. He taught the lesson as he always did, but his eyes kept drifting to June. He was watching him, studying him, like a scientist with a new discovery. The lesson that day was about navigating a damaged ship. The cadets had to work in teams to patch hull breaches and reroute power. Before, June and Sue were always the last picked. Today it was different. Park Ji-hyo was the first to speak. "Cadet June," she said, her voice polite and logical. "Would you and Cadet Sue like to join our team? Your fine motor control would be very useful for the wiring repairs." June looked at Sue. She raised her eyebrows, a small smile on her face. He turned back to Park Ji-hyo and nodded. "Yes, we can help." They worked together. Park Ji-hyo gave orders. June and Sue handled the delicate work inside the control panels. The other cadets on the team, who before would have taken the tools from them, now just watched. They watched June's hands, the same hands that had lifted the keeper's stone, now gently reconnecting tiny wires. They did not understand it, but they respected it. Bakdai's team struggled. They were all strong cadets, good at moving heavy things, but they were clumsy with the small, intricate repairs. They kept making mistakes. Bakdai grew more and more frustrated. He looked over at June's team. They were working smoothly and efficiently. They were already ahead. He saw June lift a heavy access panel that was stuck. He did not strain. He just lifted it and held it while Sue worked underneath. It was so casual, so easy. Bakdai finally understood. He had been judging the humans by his own standards. He thought that because they did not show their strength in his way, they had no strength. He was wrong. Their strength was there, waiting for when it was needed. Not for showing off. Not for pride. For getting the job done. It was a humbling thought. Later, during a break, Kim Soo found June looking out a large window at the stars. "Quite a change, isn't it?" she said, leaning against the wall next to him. June nodded slowly. "Yes, it is quieter now," Sue laughed. "Quieter? Everyone is talking about you. They are not yelling at us anymore," June said. "That is quieter." Sue understood what he meant. The constant pressure was gone. The mockery was gone. They had earned a space to exist. They had earned respect, but why didn't you tell me? Sue asked after a moment. "I knew you were strong, but that... You never even tried it in training." June turned from the window to look at her. "What would have changed if I had?" Bakdai would have found something else to mock. They would have seen one strength but still been blind to all the others. They saw us as weak but clever. Now they do not know what to see. That is better. Now they are thinking he was right. The other cadets were thinking. They were reassessing everything they thought they knew about humans. They were looking at June and Sue not as a type, but as individuals with unknown abilities. The final lesson of the day was a lecture from Kalar. It was about the history of the Galactic Commonwealth, but at the end he looked at all of them. "A warrior must know his own strengths," Kalar said, his voice echoing in the lecture hall. "But a true officer must know the strengths of others. He must see beyond the shell, beyond the appearance. You must learn to see the potential in the most unlikely places." He did not look at June when he said this. He did not need to. Every cadet in the room knew what he meant. After the lecture, as the cadets were leaving, Kalar spoke again. "Cadet June, a moment." June stayed behind. Sue gave him a worried look, but he nodded for her to go on. When they were alone, Kalar walked down to where June stood. The large Xylosian looked down at the human. "Your file from Earth," Kalar began. "It mentioned your physical scores were exceptional. I believed it was by human standards. I did not realize it was by any standard." June waited. "Why are you here, Cadet June?" Kalar asked. It was not an accusation. It was a real question. A being with your capabilities could be many things. Why the military? Why the academy? June thought for a moment. On Earth, there are many people who can lift heavy things, he said. It is not special. I wanted to see the stars. I wanted to learn about other species. The academy was the best way. It is not about using strength. It is about using my mind. Kalar was silent for a long time. He finally nodded. I misjudged your species, and I misjudged you. I saw a lack of power. I did not see the discipline to hide that power until it was useful. That is a greater strength than any I have seen in a long time. It was the highest praise June had ever received. That evening in the common room, the atmosphere was different. June and Sue sat at a table talking quietly. They were not alone. Park Ji-hyo came over and asked if she could join them. She asked June polite, curious questions about human physiology, about endurance, about Earth. Other cadets listened. They did not interrupt. They just listened. Bakdai sat across the room. He watched them. The anger was gone from his face. It was replaced by thoughtfulness. He saw June not as a rival, but as a puzzle he had failed to solve. He had learned a lesson more important than any drill. Appearances are a lie. Lee June went to bed that night the same as always. But the world around him had changed. He had not changed it with a loud voice or a proud display. He had changed it with a single quiet action. He had lifted a weight to clean a floor, and in doing so he had lifted the weight of everyone's low expectations. He had shown them that humanity was not weak. They were just waiting for the right moment to show what they could do. And for a human, the right moment was not always a test of pride. Sometimes it was just a practical problem that needed to be solved.